Hello guys and gals and welcome! So today we're going to be talking about New World, and I think before we talk about New World, let's look at the trailer for New World, alright? So I'm going to pull up the trailer for New World. We're gonna look at this on camera here, alright? So here we go. And you ready? You know what, let me take myself off here so you can really get a good look at this trailer. And here we go. Okay, that's not the actual trailer for New World. But I wanted to make a point, and the point is the New World is so much like Skyrim, it's not even funny. And there are parallels to Skyrim that just continually rise up as I play. And the more and more I delved into the game, the more I realized it was like Skyrim. And it continued to be more and more like Skyrim. Now, there are obvious differences between Skyrim and this game, and one of the first and foremost that would obviously come to mind is that it's online, and it's multiplayer, and it's PvP. So online, multiplayer, and PvP are three things that Skyrim is not. However, the New World has this sort of a vast system of crafting and this actioned RPG, almost kind of like style of combat, which is extremely similar to Skyrim's in many ways. And despite the fact that it employs this in an online environment, it still comes off feeling very much like Skyrim, and thus the meme at the beginning of this video. Now, this wouldn't be a good thoughts video if I didn't tell you what other MMOs I have played over my years. And the list is more than I have fingers. So let me just hit the highlights, shall we? I played Final Fantasy XI. I've played EVE Online. I've played Final Fantasy XIV. I've played Lord of the Rings Online. I've played Age of Conan. That's one handout. I've played World of Warcraft. I have played Star Wars Galaxies. I have played the Lego MMO even. I have also played Rift, and I have played God, the list is so long, sometimes I even forget them. WildStar Online, and I mean, I could keep going on and on and on. And the truth of the matter is it's not important because there's just too many MMOs for me to list. And the reason why I want to put this at the beginning of the video is because I want you to know that as I review and give you my thoughts on New World, it is coming from a rather vast amount of experience. I spent nearly 11 years playing Final Fantasy XI Online. I spent 5 years playing Final Fantasy XIV. I spent 10 years playing Lord of the Rings Online. I spent 3 years playing EVE Online. And the list goes on and on and on. And some of those MMOs actually did overlap with each other. I will say that. So the years are not as dedicated as you might otherwise think. I definitely flipped a lot between Final Fantasy XI and Lord of the Rings, but there is this massive amount of knowledge that I've accumulated over the years. And I'm not trying to just puff myself up and make myself have a big ego. I'm just trying to say that I know what I'm talking about. Now, New World is a very interesting MMO, and I'm going to preface this by saying something in particular. MMOs fail a lot. As many MMOs as I have participated in that were successes, I have participated in so many more that were failures, or that were, in my eyes, not really good MMOs. And maybe they didn't fail, but they didn't succeed either. Black Desert Online comes to mind. I've never seen a game that completely incorporated bots into itself like Black Desert Online did. You got a botting problem? Well, who cares? Everybody has bots. We give bots to everybody who joins. Nobody in the game is going to have a bot problem because everyone's going to have bots. So, New World. New World is a very interesting game that seems to be based almost entirely around Skyrim's system. Everything from the little indicators on the compass to the crafting system to the combat system, and I mean, all of it is just in this game. And the crafting system reminds me so much of Skyrim that it's not even funny. They have made obvious changes. So, like for instance, in Skyrim, if you want to craft 100, steel, you have to stand there and craft every piece of steel. Whereas in New World, if you want to craft 100 steel, you can just simply craft 100 steel, and it takes like 1 second. However, if you want to craft 100 daggers, you have to sit there and craft every single dagger, just like in Skyrim. So there are definitely some changes, and there are definitely some things that didn't change. So when you're crafting your 100 daggers to get your crafting skill up, you're going to have fun with that. Although I haven't actually seen a dagger in the game yet, so there's that. I guess it would be short swords then, or whatever other whatever the cheapest recipe is at this particular time. They've also decided to do a very interesting thing, which is, again, extremely similar to Skyrim. And it's leveling up your character by crafting. So in Skyrim, you may be aware that, if you were to sit in town and just level up your blacksmithing, and you just kept leveling up your blacksmithing, as a level 1 character, your level 1 character would very soon rise to a level 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10... level 20 character before you even know it, because leveling from 1 to 100 will, in fact, increase your EXP, and you'd probably also level up some other things in the process, like leatherworking and, so forth and so on. And it just kind of like, in general, in Skyrim, you can level up your character without ever leaving town if you, have the money. And, it's the same way in this game. You can level up your character without leaving town. So, like, you can literally go out, mine yourself a bunch of, wood and fiber and get some rocks, and you don't have to kill anything. You don't have to do any actual combat. Like, it's literally right there outside of town, like on the border of the town. And you go back in town and you start crafting this stuff up, and before you know it, you'll be level 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it takes no time at all. When I was playing, my nephew was playing with me, and he was like level 11, and I was level 9. And then when I came back, he was like level 17, and I was level 12. And I'm like, you went out and fought a whole bunch of monsters without me? He's like, no, I just sat it down and crafted. And it's really silly. I don't know how to put it other than that. There's no NPC items though. So like in Skyrim, of course, you go to the blacksmith to buy your ingots, whereas in New World, you don't go to the blacksmith to buy your ingots. You go to the market board and you buy them from other players, or you make them yourself. And so they seem to be focusing this almost entirely around a player-based economy, which means that none of the items are being provided by the actual NPCs, and that's kind of a cool thing. I like that. However, in a player-driven economy, that means you need lots of players to drive it, and without those players, it might falter. Just a side note. Now, I found myself very interested in the way that the game was constructed. And it revolves around that topic I just talked about, the trade economy being driven by the players. The entire game seems to be focused around the idea that the players will dictate what goes on in almost every single way. The players will dictate the trade systems. The players will dictate what territories are owned. The players will dictate how a territory upgrades its equipment, like its smelter and its blacksmith shop. The players will fight for control over these areas in PvP matches. Even the PvP quests seem very poignant in forcing players into confrontation with each other. There are also keeps and towers and things like that that can be taken over by factions, and then of course that you can also go to war with those factions and try to take them from them. So if you're an opposing faction, there are 3 main factions in the game, and those factions are the Marauders, the Syndicate, and I believe the Paladins. I could be wrong on that, but it's 3. and basically they are at odds with each other. They are at war with each other, and they can kill each other at will, essentially. Now, the interesting thing about New World is that as you in the very beginning, you start to learn these little details, and some of the details that you learn are that people don't die, and even if they do die, they rise back up. Some of them rise back up as normal people, and some of them rise back up as corrupted. And the corrupted are kind of like zombies, I guess. And nobody ages on the island either. So this island is just like this place in the middle of nowhere. It's called a Turnum, and apparently when any ship arrives, a storm comes and completely destroys the ship. And from a couple of the notes, I was able to put together the fact that the ship, or the storm that is destroying the ship, seems to be sentient, has a mind of its own. And some people have claimed to see a kraken inside, although other people claim to have seen something else. So it's kind of an unknown. And nobody really knows why apparently no one dies on the island. So you end up with these three factions, and the three factions are at war with each other, but none of them can ever win, because as soon as you strike someone down, they just rise back up. And kind of makes for a very hard way to wage a war, especially when you have an enemy that can't be killed, essentially. And this makes for a very interesting situation with the PvP in the game, is that all three factions are essentially on almost a never-ending conflict with each other. However, all three factions also have agreed to certain rules, like, for instance, sanctuary locations are off-limits for PvP, and apparently all three factions will still gather together to remove the corruption, which is an ever-present threat to the island. Apparently, if the corruption spreads too far, everyone turns into like a zombie. Now, the combat system is very nice. I actually enjoy it quite a lot. It's very similar to Skyrim's combat system, very action-orientated, very point my sword here, point my spear here. If I didn't point my spear correctly, it's not going to land, and so forth and so on. And it's nice. I like it. So far, I've used the spear, the fire staff, the hatchet, and the bow, and I was pleasantly surprised with all of them. The hatchet is actually pretty sweet as a throwing item, as well as a melee weapon. I really love the spear's abilities. My nephew has been using the sword and shield, as well as the healing staff, and I believe he also used the axe, and he said he liked all three of them as well. And this brings me to another point, is that just like Skyrim, you level up your character and you choose your class by choosing your weapon. Okay, so just like in Skyrim, if I wanna level up an axe or a sword, or if I want to level up a two-handed weapon, I'm gonna put that two-handed weapon on, and I'm gonna beat the ever-loving crap out of some things with it. And as I beat the ever-loving crap out of some things, my skill level in that will go up. And exactly the same way in New World, if you put on a sword and a shield and you go out and you fight things, you will gain skill points in that ability. And there are two trees. There are two trees for each weapon. So, like, for instance, on the sword and shield, there's a DPS tree, and then there's a tanking tree. For the spear, there's a very high DPS tree, and then there's one that seems to be more dedicated to sort of kind of like an AoE. On the bow, there is definitely a high single target damage tree, and then there is a high AoE damage tree. And it's very interesting to look at. Basically, every single weapon has two specs, and there are multiple weapons, and you can wield two weapons at any given time. So you can swap back and forth between two weapons, essentially kind of like dual building your character. So, like, say you wanted to be a healer and a tank, you could put the sword and board on and have spec'd into the the tank tree, and then you could go and put on the healer staff, and then you could spec into the healer tree, and then at any point you could switch weapons and start using heals, or you can switch weapons back and start tanking. And I found this to be really interesting, especially in PvP, because as a melee character, you often are stuck in these situations where people are ranging you, and you can't do anything about it. So what I did was I picked a hatchet for my second weapon, which is a decent melee slash ranged ability. Has a couple nice ranged rends and some other things that I can use, which will help me out when I'm chasing somebody. And I've had a lot of fun swapping back and forth between these. I usually will start out with the thrown axe rend, and there's also a poison axe. So I'll throw those at the target as I'm rushing toward them, and then I switch over to my spear and I start attacking with the spear, get my bleeds off and whatnot, and I start trying to get out around from behind. The dodge system is very interesting as well because it has 3 different modes. So if you are in light armor, you gain a nice roll, so very reminiscent of Dark Souls. When you are in medium armor, you gain it's kind of like a hop to the side. And when you are in heavy armor, it's more like a slow sidestep. And it definitely makes for some interesting choices of how you want to build your character, and there are other benefits to choosing light, medium, and heavy. So heavy users will have better block stability. They have higher crowd control timers and stuff like that. So they're able to apply crowd control timers that last longer. Whereas the light armor users, they're gaining faster movement, and they're getting the ability to use like spells and stuff better. So each one of them is sort of balanced out to how you would want it. And of course, you can build your character however you want. You could build a DPS character wearing heavy armor, or you could build a healer wearing heavy armor if you want to. But you're going to have to suffer from whatever the consequences are of those particular choices. So if you want to be a light user and run real fast and dodge all the time, then that's what your choice. Or if you want to be a heavy user with a big old shield and you're blocking lots of damage and you can't really dodge very well, but you're in there and you got really nice block stability, so you're trying to keep your front to the enemy. That's your choice. So there really are no classes in the game, so far as there's just simply you make a character, you choose the weapons you want, you choose the armor class you want, and then you kind of go from there, and it works out really, really well. You can even mix and match armor qualities. So for instance, if you were to say put on like 3 pieces of medium armor and 2 pieces of heavy armor, you might still be a medium class, because there are actually like numbers that dictate where the medium class ends and where the heavy class begins. So you can like mix and match pieces if you would like, and that's what I did on my character. I have 3 pieces of medium armor on, and then I have 2 heavy pieces just so I can get that extra defense. And I'm still in the medium class, which helps me out, and it's a really enjoyable thing to be able to just pick up a weapon, walk outside, and just start working on your skills. Or pick up an axe, walk outside, and just start chopping away at some trees. And as you can see, this is my character here on the screen. I'm looking over here, of course, because this is where I can see it. You guys can see it up on the big screen. And you see, I have 3 abilities there. The one that's on Q, which is my main bleed. And then I have the one that is on R is my preferate, which is basically 3 quick attacks that applies an armor rend, which is essentially a reduction in the amount of defense that the target has. And then the last one there is the volt kick, which is very interesting. It's basically a stun. And I chose this specifically because I wanted to do some PvP, and I figured bleeds, stun, and an armor reduction is probably a good start for a nice melee killer character for PvP. And I did fairly well in PvP. There was a couple interesting PvP situations I ran into as I played around, and I was definitely very interested in the PvP. Let me see if I can fast forward a little bit to when I was PvPing. All right, so this is around the time that I was doing some PvP, and I believe Mark was with me, so we were having a lot of fun together. I just want to make sure that I'm got you guys to the right spot here. PvP protection timer. So that's another important thing here, is that when you leave the PvP zone flagged as PvP, so you have to actually flag as PvP, you have to actually go outside, and you have to actually wait 30 seconds before you are technically allowed to PvP. So right now I'm currently at 13 seconds, as you can see there, so I can't attack until my PvP timer is up. and I'm just kind of waiting. Now, this might look like we were ganking them, but I can promise you that earlier on they were totally ganking us. And basically, what happened is we kind of came back and decided that hey, that's not fun. And we kind of grouped up on them, and it was actually quite satisfying because it was four of them just ganking everyone that walked out of the door, and essentially they ganked enough people that eventually we all grouped up and we just handed them their butt, and I guess that's kind of the beauty of an open PvP sort of system is that you can do that if you would like to. There was also some odd glitches that I noticed where it seemed like the PvP was broken. Sometimes you would end up in town and PvP would still be on. So they do have some work to do as far as bugs are concerned. And as you can see up above the weapons, there is a section where the food is. So this is like your consumables. So you can see you have 4 consumable slots, and you can put food and potions there. And as you can see, I'm using my quick dodge to get away from his axe attack. And right now, it's basically me versus, I think it was like 3 people. You guys can't see, but there's another guy that's hiding off on the side that is firing with his musket over and over again. And this is actually one of the situations where I was stuck in PvP while I was in town, and I don't exactly know why I was stuck in PvP in town. I tried to go into town to avoid the conflict between the 3 versus 1, which is essentially what was going on here. And the PvP did not disable. So I don't know if that's a feature. Like maybe I was trying to abuse the PvP flagging system, and so they decided to not deflag me. But and later I did try to attack somebody while I was supposedly flagged, and I couldn't attack someone. So it was like actually pretty badly bugged. And this particular guy, he's the musketeer who hides in the kind of hides in the bushes, and we didn't see him at first, but eventually we were wise to his game, and so every time he would go off into the bushes and hide, we would make sure to find and kill him. And here you can see this is a situation where the PvP did not deflag, and I'm literally inside of town attacking this guy. He ran into town hoping that the PvP timer would save him, and it did not. And his friend there, the Western Duckling, however, his PvP timer did start, and he was unflagged when he came into town. So me and him were not, but the other guy was, and so it's really odd. And he was involved in the fight. He got hits off too, just like we did, and so I'm not really sure why that exactly was. But enough about that. We also have the crafting system. Let me pull up. I'm sure I have at least some crafting system video here. So this is me trying to craft an item using these special pieces. So there's like these little special things that you can accumulate over time. They're called crafting resources, special resources, and you put them in there, and it kind of guarantees you those stats. So if you find one that guarantees you strength and dex, you're always going to get strength and dex. Or if you find one that guarantees you like intelligence and focus, whatever it is, you put those in there, and it allows you to make that item. And as you can see, the game has really a lot of hustle and bustle to it. There's a lot of people online, a lot of people crafting. There were a lot of people out PvPing. There were people taking over territories, and I really feel like this game could succeed. I was very impressed, and it takes a lot to impress me because, like I said, I have played a lot of MMOs over the years, and some MMOs just really are underwhelming. The game does have a personal loot system, which is rather unfortunate, but it is a personal loot system that allows trading. Now, since they have this whole world based on trading, you would assume that they would probably go with a free-for-all system. But it seems kind of odd that they would make the entire game based on the players control everything. The players control the trade system. The players control the marketplace. The players control this, but then they still have bind on equip and personal loot, which is a little odd to me. I feel like if you were going to make a system like this, specifically based around the players, giving the players the entire authority on the game, bind on equip probably shouldn't be a thing. Personal loot, I can maybe understand because you want people to be guaranteed some loot and equipment and things, but bind on equip I don't think has any place in this game, and it's only going to hamper the trade system. I mean, if I have a really awesome spear that I've found and I use it for like an hour, I should be able to take that spear and sell it on the market board afterward. But as soon as I equip it to my character, it's bound to me forever, and the only thing I can do with it at that point is dismantle it, because once I've got a better spear, there's literally no other use for it. I'm not sure if they have limited characters to one per person, but when I actually played the game and I made my character, it told me I was only allowed one character. Which, if you really think about it from a very interesting point of view, because there are no classes and because you can pretty much change your class at any point just by simply changing your weapon, which is very reminiscent of Final Fantasy 11 and Final Fantasy 14, because you changed your weapon and you changed your job, and as soon as you changed your job, it was just it's a little silly, but it's not the best example in the world. Is this a good MMO that you could maybe put some time into? I think so. Do I think it's going to succeed? It has a chance to. Do I think it has long-term longevity? Long-term longevity. That's a mouthful, especially since it's the same word twice, really. But that's what MMOs are all about, right? They're about long-term longevity. Well, I feel like some of the items are a little easy to obtain. And this can be an issue because what you're creating is a marketplace that is fueled by the players. And if the players can find these items extremely easily, then it's going to be very easy to flood the market with those items and make them worthless. There's also this interesting dynamic which they have added to the game, which is where there are no mounts and there are no flying mounts. So you basically walk everywhere, and this makes the world much more vast and much more difficult to get around in. And even the fast travel system requires the use of a material called Azoth. Aloth. I can't remember the exact wording. I'm sure if I rewound here, I'd be able to see it. Yeah, that's it right there. The blue stuff that was just up on the screen, I'm sure it'll pop back up. Yeah, this right here, Azoth. So the entire game is kind of balanced around this Azoth, and you require Azoth to fast travel. You also require Azoth to make better items and the craft. You require Azoth for a lot of different things, pretty much all of the crafts, and all the fast travel. And then they charge you more Azoth if you want to fast travel while you are overburdened or like heavily encumbered with equipment. So let's say you've gone to a town and you've emptied out your storage and you're trying to bring all your iron to the next city, and you fast travel back. You are going to have trouble because it's going to charge you more Azoth because of your weight. It also charges you more Azoth by distance. So they've created this dynamic in the game that is based around it's not easy to travel places. It's not easy to get somewhere. And you need to find a place and, I guess, kind of settle down. Now, I could actually see myself getting into this game, and I haven't gotten into an MMO in a little while. The last MMO I think I really played for quite some time was Final Fantasy 14. I want to say Final Fantasy 14. That was the one I really was into for quite some time, and I had a lot of problems with Final Fantasy 14, namely that it wasn't Final Fantasy 11. I really loved Final Fantasy 11, and I think I judge Final Fantasy 14 just extremely harshly because of that. And it's not that Final Fantasy 14 was a awful game, but I really feel like Final Fantasy 14 was just a dumbed down version of Final Fantasy 11, an extremely dumbed down version. They went through the process of making things so much easier, despite the fact that Final Fantasy 11 had an amazing community, and did very well despite its difficulty. And Final Fantasy 7 or 11 online was based around a group structure. You really couldn't do anything without a group, and Final Fantasy 14 was a lot less so. And I played it even before they fixed it. And before they fixed it, it was still not great. I just don't know what they were going for exactly. I feel like they could have done a better job. And it's important also to talk about this, because when I talk about New World, I don't get the same feelings that I did from Final Fantasy 14. So when I originally played Final Fantasy 14, I wasn't impressed. It was not a game that I thought I was going to get into. I felt like I wasted my money. And the more I delved into it, the more certain I was that it was not going to be a good game. And as it turned out, many other people had a very similar idea and impression of Final Fantasy 14. So when I talk about New World, I want to give the impression that I do think it could succeed. I don't get an impression that it is going to be a poor MMO. I get the impression that it is very well crafted and it will do extremely well, especially because of the PvP element. There is definitely a large PvE sort of thing going on there, but I get the feeling that despite the PvE aspect of the game, it is definitely more focused around the PvP. If anything, it almost seems to be balanced around the PvP, and not so much the PvE. And it's very open world PvP as well. So I mean, if you are not familiar with open world PvPs and how brutal they can be, it might be something that you might want to look into. Open world PvP can be a gank fest at times. If you run around solo, you can get murdered by 6 or 7 people at a time, and of course it's not fair. Even if you're in a group, you can get murdered by a raid of people who are all running around together. I played Lord of the Rings online for a very long time. I was Sherwood, the captain on Brandywine. If any of you guys are gals remember me from back in the day, I honestly feel like I was the best captain on Brandywine. And there was only really a couple other people that I thought were even close, and I will not say their names. The the PvP on Lord of the Rings Online is very similar to the PvP in this game, with some obvious exceptions. So the PvP in Lord of the Rings Online was limited to one particular area, and then eventually they did spread to another. But in New World, the PvP is across the entire island of Eternum, which does make for a much broader scope. Now, when you play an open world PvP, similar to Lord of the Rings Online, once you enter into the PvP zone as a PvP player, which you have to do in New World, you have to actually toggle PvP on, you are creating a situation where you are vulnerable. As soon as you walk out into the Bloodmoor on Lord of the Rings Online, you are vulnerable. If you're a solo player, you could very easily get ganked by 2 other players who are running along together. And if you are 2 other players running along together, you can very easily get ganked by 4 other players running along together, and so forth and so on. And it's open world PvP is a very feel out what's going on situation. If you walk out into the Bloodmoor and there's a giant raid versus another giant raid, it's probably not a good time to be running around solo, because chances are the raid is going to roll right over top of your head, crush your face into the dirt, and pee on your corpse as they run by. So, it's open PvP can be very brutal in this way, but at the same time, if you figure out how to play in a raid, and you figure out how to do solo, and you figure out how to do duo, and you figure out how to do 6-man, and so forth and so on, you can adjust as the situation is, requires you to. And I used to do a lot of solo on my captain, and it was a very brutal experience. I learned a lot back in those days, and I can tell you from those days that playing a captain alone on Lord of the Rings Online was one of the toughest things I've ever done, and I feel like I handled it very well. I had to come up with very unique strategies and ways to deal with issues that no one had ever thought to deal with before, and I even used skills and things that no one ever thought you could use in those ways, and that is what PvP is about. It's about applying your mind to a problem and coming up with a solution in a way that somebody may not have originally thought of. And this game seems like it has a lot of solutions to problems like that, especially since you can use two weapons, which means you're essentially two classes. So you could have a really nice sword and shield, and you could also be using a bow, and you could fire the bow, and when someone gets close, you could switch to the sword and shield for defensive purposes to stay alive while your teammates show up, or whatever it is that you want to do. You could be a fire and an ice mage or something, or you could be a healer and a DPS. The combinations are endless, honestly, and it seems like from chat, it looked like they had talked about adding more and more weapon styles into the game. So eventually, we will be looking at even more combinations than we currently have. Whew, I've gone on for 35 minutes already about this game. I hope I've given you guys at least some impression of what the game is like. And I don't know. I want to go over a couple more things, though, and I know this has dragged out a little bit, but if you're really interested in this game, just hang in there. So resources. So you notice how I'm collecting some hemp right now. Well, I've noticed that in the game, some of the resources seem to be kind of restricted to specific areas, and I think maybe we will see something in this game along the lines of resource control management. If you guys have never heard anything like that, there was some of it in Final Fantasy XI. So basically, what happens was in Final Fantasy XI, if you took a particular area, you made a conquest essentially, and you took over that area. If that particular resource was produced in that area, then the NPC that sold that resource would only appear in your town. Well, they seem to have gone in a kind of a different route, but still with the same kind of idea in mind, is that I've noticed that some of the resources seem to be more heavily placed in certain regions. And like, for instance, the region I started in, I could not find any hemp to save my life. And no matter where I looked, it was like there just was none. And I'm sure that there probably was some, but it was like I could not find any. And then when I went to one of the other regions, there was hemp literally everywhere. And so I don't know if that was maybe an oversight or if that's just purposeful. They wanted specific areas to have more of a specific resource than others. Like, for instance, there was one area I went to that had a massive amount of iron and silver. And despite the fact of me searching for a long time in some of the other areas, although I would find some iron, I wouldn't find very much, and I couldn't even find any silver at all in those areas. So it definitely seemed like those particular areas were very heavy on the minerals, and it comes to my mind that perhaps in the future, when clans have been formed, divisions have been made, and territories are under control, that certain resources may very well be monopolized, or mostly monopolized anyway, by those factions that own those areas. Now, of course, anyone can come and try and take those areas from them, and it's very much a world of invasion. When you look at the map and you look at how big the world is and how hard it is to travel around and actually patrol, kind of your zone, it's kind of difficult to prevent people from coming in and trying to take over your stuff. There are a lot of quests, like faction quests and PvP quests and whatnot, which would definitely make it easier for you to take over an area, but if your team that owns the keep is doing those quests also, you will encounter those people when you PvP, and that brings me to the quests themselves. So there are a lot of PvP quests, and it was very obvious to me that due to the limited amount of resources on those quests, like say for instance they wanted you to kill a boar, or a turkey, or a ram, there was only like one ram in the entire area. So you can tell right off the bat that for a PvP quest, they don't want you to complete the quest. They want you to go there, and they want you to kill other people who are trying to get that quest. Because if there's only one sheep, you can't share the sheep. You need 5 sheep. And the sheep is on a rather lengthy cooldown. So, sharing it with multiple other people who are, in different factions is going to be a big no-no, and you're going to have to kill them to make sure that they're not stealing your sheep or your turkey or whatever it is that you're there to PvP for. And in this way, you can tell that they are kind of forcing the PvP to happen at these nodes. Now, of course, some of the PvP just simply happened right outside of town, and that was kind of one of the more silly things, I think, was people just literally sitting outside of town trying to fight anyone who left town. And of course, you would have to actually flag when you leave town. But the interesting thing is that you wouldn't actually know that they were PvP flagged until you got out, because most of the time they would be hiding. So it's almost like in the old days, you have like highwaymen, right? The group aspect of the game was very interesting. I played the spear user mainly with my nephew Mark, who played the sword and shield user, and I definitely found it to be very beneficial to be playing with a tank, as most MMOs tend to be. But Mark was able to withstand substantial amount of damage that I could not. There were several times where a monster would literally one-shot and kill me, and that is quite a feat, because honestly, when you are playing this game, what you're going to find out is that when you're killed, you just simply fall on the ground, and people can actually help you back up. So there's no like revive spell, but if you're not technically dead, you can actually come back from that. But there are monsters in the game that will hit you hard enough that you are not coming back from it, and I've had that happen quite a few times. But those same monsters that would hit and kill me in one hit would hit Mark and would barely do any damage, because he had built his character completely around a defensive spec. So it just goes to show you that if you build your character defensively, you will get the defense you're looking for, and if you build your character offensively, you will get the offense you're looking for. I built my character offensively, and he built his character defensively, and our pairing worked very well together, because I was able to kill everything. There was nothing I could not damage, and he was able to tank everything. There was nothing he could not tank. We would go into zones that were literally monsters 10 levels higher than us, and we would still do just fine as long as he was the one tanking and I was the one, in the pack poking people in the butt. And as you can see here, I'm fighting some level 23s. I believe at this particular point I'm only level 18, which, as you can see, they hurt me quite extensively, even with all my little buffs and things that I'm running. And lots of food eating, lots of crafting that I needed to make rations and things like that to make sure I was constantly able to regenerate my health. And I really do like the system. Like, just the system of combat in general. I 42 minutes into this video, and I'm gonna put my closing thoughts here. I think I've rambled long enough. I like it. Okay, I like the game. I could see myself playing this game. I didn't think I would ever get involved in another MMO for as long as I lived, because quite honestly, I've played too many in my lifetime. And MMOs tend to be such a huge drain on time and resources, and it's just something that I just don't have in abundance anymore. But this game seems like one that I could pick up at any time and just have some fun PvPing with some friends. It seems like a game that I could devote several days to, or I could put down and not come back to for a week. It doesn't really seem like the classic kind of MMO where I would be tied into it like a job, and that sort of appeals to me. There are some very alluring aspects of this game as well. One of the things that I always thought was very poor in MMOs was the fast travel mechanics. I always felt that they kind of cheapened the game and they made it into less of what it should be. But this game has gone the other direction and has said, hey, no horses, no flying mounts, and fast travel is very restricted, and you're going to have to pay for it. And this is very interesting to me, because it really sort of makes the example of that I'm looking for, which is enjoy the game, don't skip over it. And right here, I actually try to help this guy out who's being chased down by someone who's PvPing, and I wasn't initially going to fight him, but I kind of had no choice. I was trying to help out this guy, and then come to find out that as I got closer to him, I found out he was like level, was it 31? And he was literally like 13 levels higher than me, because I'm pretty sure at this point I was only level 17, and he absolutely destroyed me, and it was not nice. It was not. There is a huge difference in the power level of a like just 10 levels higher than you player. Just 10 levels higher you is enough to just absolutely demolish you. And open world PvP is always going to be unfair in this way, and there's really not much that you can do about it. If you're going into an open world PvP game, you need to be aware and ready for this. You shouldn't be getting upset if you die in these ways, because honestly, that's just par for the course. So do I recommend the game? Yes. Do I think it's going to be an absolute smashing success? There's absolutely no way to tell. Does the starting indications of this game give me a good feeling that it will be a success? Yes. I remember to this day, when I picked up Final Fantasy XI, I knew I was going to play that game. When I picked up Lord of the Rings Online, I knew I was going to play that game. I bought a Founders account because I was so sure I was going to play Lord of the Rings Online for a long time. And that thing paid off more than I could have ever hoped. In fact, my nephew is currently using my Founders account at this point. I'm not going to say that I would buy a Founders account for this game or anything, but I might want to make some more videos on it. I might want to, take another look at this once it's released. And unfortunately, it is going to be released after Diablo 2 Resurrected, which means I'm going to be pretty heavily invested in Diablo 2 Resurrected at that point. But I would like to put a little bit of time into this. I'm afraid that I'm just not going to have the amount of time needed to put into an MMO, and that is always a consideration. So even if this is an amazing MMO, and even if this is going to be a rousing success, you still have to ask yourself the question, do I have the time? Because MMOs really do take a lot of time out of your day. I spent 3 days on this game, and I managed to get myself to level 20 just at the end of the third day, and I wasn't able to spend the fourth day on this game because of real-life obligations. And I don't know. My heart is telling me that I would like to play it, and my time is telling me that I don't have the time to play it. Oh, man. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my rambling long videos, and keep watching.